Thank you, everyone. I appreciate so much you staying, and the folks online also. I appreciate your staying to hear about what I'm going to say about the recycling plant that is proposed across the street from here. My name is Sandy Field. I live in Lewisburg. I've lived there for 20 years. I haven't always been an environmentalist, but recently, of course, things have changed with climate change has reared its ugly head and made us all aware that the climate crisis is upon us. And so I've become a Climate Reality Project leader. I'm the chair of the Susquehanna Valley chapter of the Climate Reality Project. And I come to speak for the trees. Actually, you know, the service was so appropriate today. There was another line in here, awakening to reaffirm our commitment to the value of our home. I think by the time I'm done speaking, you'll see what I'm talking about. I also come to speak for the river, which is what this plant is going to threaten most. So I want to do, I'm going to talk a little bit about the plant and what we know about it and the company. And I'm going to talk a little bit about our concerns about the company and the plant. And then what I want this to mostly be is open it to your questions. So whenever, at the end, we'll have plenty of time for that. I'm just going to talk like 10 or 15 minutes. So Alex, if you could go to the next slide, please. So when this plant was proposed, or when we first were made aware of this plant last April, Advanced Recycling as a Climate Reality Project leader sounds like a good thing to me. We have a really big plastics problem, and recycling plastic, we really need to do a lot more of that. So this sounds like a good idea. So I attended the open house that the company held, which was here just at the VFW building right next door. And I learned that the plant is going to be located here along the river. You can see in red the location, just here across Route 11. It's going to be let's see, so south of the Point Drive-In and north of the Strong Industries. It's on a piece of land that's right on the river. It doesn't have public water, and you'll see why that's important later. They're going to bring in 450,000 tons of post-consumer plastic on trucks from areas in the Northeast. So big cities, you know, New York, Baltimore, the Wilkes-Barre area. They're going to bring that here on trucks, and they're going to take that plastic and wash it and sort it, and then the number 3s to number 7, which is harder to recycle than the 1s and 2s. So, you know, 1s and 2s are like milk bottles and things like that, clear plastic, and then the 3s to 7s are the ones that are different shapes and different colors and things like that. I mean, obviously there's chemical differences, and that's why they're harder to recycle. But, so this is going to be unique for these kinds of plants because of their handling of these unusual plastic types. And then they're going to do some kind of process, which I'll talk about a little bit more, to break down the plastics and make chemicals from that: benzene, toluene, xylene, and propylene, which are chemicals that can be then used to make more plastic. So those plastics will be stored on site. I mean, those chemicals will be stored on site and then taken in train cars in the existing train, on the existing train tracks along the river. Okay, so that's, if we could go to the next slide, please. The company is called Encina, Encina Development Group in Woodland, Texas. The plant is supposedly going to cost $1.1 billion. They say that there's going to be 300 full-time jobs created, and it's going to have an average salary of $75,000 a year. But in my discussions with them, that average salary, of course, that's not everybody who's going to get paid that much. It's the engineers who are going to run the chemical process are going to get high salaries, and then, you know, there's going to be lower salaries than that. So they admitted that that's not really going to be what most people will make. And in fact, the 300 jobs is also a number that has sort of changed over time, and we see different claims at different times for different reasons, depending on the audience. They have no record of success with a similar plant. As I mentioned, this process that they're using is new. They supposedly have a pilot plant that does this process in Texas, but that plant is not yet operational, and we're not sure. It's much smaller, and they haven't gotten that to work yet either. It's supposed to be $1.1 billion, but as far as we can tell, they've gained about $55 million in financing for the project, so we're not sure where that number comes from. We don't think that there are a lot of like local tax subsidies, which is actually a really common thing with this kind of plant, where they get a bump from the local community to bring the jobs to the community. It doesn't seem to be the case here. And then the local economic development company, Drive, which I'm sure you've all heard of, has bought the site and is going to lease it to the company. So that is, go to the next slide, please, Alex. So the plant is going to be built, and this is going to get a little bit technical. I'll try to be clear about it, but afterwards you can let me know if you have questions. We can go back to this. So it's going to be built in 2 phases. The first phase is where they're going to bring in the plastics, they're going to wash them, they're going to sort them. Initially, apparently they have someone who's going to buy that washed, sorted plastic, and they're going to just truck it back out again. That's the phase 1 plan. They've applied for their permits for that from the Department of Environmental Protection, and it's going to involve removing some water from the river for that portion because of the washing and then putting the water back in. But that's really the benign portion of the whole project. Phase 2 is the much more chemically complicated part that we're much more concerned about, where they're going to use a process called catalytic or chemical pyrolysis with a proprietary catalyst to break down the plastics after they're sorted and washed. And then that's going to vaporize, is one of the words that they've used, and then be fractionated into the chemicals, so the benzene and toluene and xylene and propylene that I mentioned. It's going to use up to 2.9 million gallons of water from the river per day, which is going to be processed on site and then put back in the river. It'll probably be a little warmer than when it came out. And they say that they're going to filter it to remove any possibility of plastics. They're also going to have a domestic water treatment. Because the site doesn't have any water, public water on its own, they're going to have a domestic water treatment plant on the site to handle the waste, the bathrooms from 300 people who are going to work there. That's also going back in the river. And then the pyrolysis process, this catalytic breakdown of plastics, is going to be powered by a natural gas pipeline, which they told me was like a quarter mile away it was going to be like an arm off from a quarter mile away. But as far as we can tell, the nearest place that they could hook into a natural gas pipeline is like 10 miles away. So they're going to bring in natural gas and use that to heat the process. So my next slide. Oh, I just want to let you know or remind you that our north branch of the river, which is this part right here, was named Pennsylvania's River of the Year by the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources last week. So just bear that in mind. This is what we're talking about, is our river, PA's River of the Year. This is going to be right on the river. So let me just talk about our concerns. Alex, please, next slide. So local residents have expressed concerns about Flooding, the site is in the 100-year floodplain of the Susquehanna River. As you know, it's just there on the other side of the highway. That's where the railroad tracks are too. We're concerned about air pollution. So it's unclear how much air pollution will be generated by this plastic pyrolysis process. Other plants of this type have a lot of emissions in terms of toxins that escape from the process. Also, there will be fossil fuel burning from the natural gas pipeline that will be part of that. So it'll have a significant carbon footprint, although the company claims that it'll be a low emitter like a university, not like a full-on coal plant. But it still is going to have a significant amount of air pollution coming from it. And they have not applied yet for the air permit, the air pollution permit from the Department of Environmental Protection for that phase 2 part. So we don't actually know the details of what that's going to entail. Although they do say that the air pollution is going to stay in the building. That surprises me a little bit, but also if my son wants to work at that place for $75,000 a year with the air pollution in the building, I don't really want that. So I don't think it sounds like a good place to work either. Water pollution, I mentioned that they're going to be bringing in a lot of water from the river, using it to wash and sort the plastics and also to cool the process of the melting process, and then treating it. What we're concerned about is microplastic. Now, at the open house, I asked them specifically about microplastic, which is very, very, microscopically small plastic, and they said they were going to micron filter the water, which I have a background in biochemistry. Micron filtration is not something that you do on 2.9 million gallons of water per day. It's a very, it's a difficult process, and I'm skeptical regarding that claim. Also, when I asked the person at the company about it, they said, actually the Susquehanna River is already polluted with microplastic, and we're going to be filtering the water as it comes in, so what we put back in the river is going to be cleaner. And a claim that I also am not sure is actually true. So we have concerns about water pollution, and also the heated water going back into the river, because the Department of Environmental Protection will allow them, and allows, like the Panda plant, to put water back into the river at a higher temperature than they got it out. And that affects all the fish populations and everything that's living in our very shallow river that I will remind you we drink out of. We're also concerned about traffic on Route 11. 450,000 tons of plastics coming by truck will have to come either through the intersection in Danville off of 80, like you're going to Geisinger, or on like 15 on Route 11 through Sunbury. So just imagine these big trucks with tons of plastic on them coming through those intersections. Those intersections are already problematic, so this will just add to that. Light pollution, the two pictures on here are actually of you may have heard that there's a plant in Pittsburgh that Shell has built to take natural gas and crack it to make plastic, the ethane cracker plant in Beaver County. The top picture is what Shell said it was going to look like, and the bottom picture is what residents, now that it's open, say that it looks like. So we're concerned about light pollution. I know, there's not a lot of people who live along here on Route 11, but it's still something that will concern people. And then noise pollution, obviously something like this is going to have a lot of noise. And the last thing is the storage of these toxic chemicals on site with regard to floods and leakage of those toxic chemicals, and moving them along the railroad tracks. And then I think I have one more content slide. So our concerns stem from the the fact that there's not a lot of information from the company has been very open and very willing to speak to us, but there's not a lot of details about what they're actually going to be doing. The terminology for the process has changed from the open house that they had in April to when I spoke to them in October. They were first calling it a vaporization process. Now that has changed to catalytic pyrolysis or chemical pyrolysis. They've used the term melting. I think if you're building a $1.1 billion plant, then you should know the chemistry already and what it's called and what it's going to do. But in my conversation with somebody at the company earlier in October, I said, well, how, I'm concerned that we don't know that this process is going to work. And she said, well, we're not really sure it's going to work, but it's really worth a try. And so I feel like it's not an established chemistry to commit a lot of money and a lot of energy into here at this site. They've already gotten an exemption from the Department of Environmental Protection for the phase 1 of the project, which is a common thing where these advanced recycling plants are getting exemptions from the air pollution that they're going to create by being classified as a manufacturing plant. And the thing is that the exemption is meant for the advanced recycling part, which is phase 2, but they've already gotten the exemption for the phase 1, which isn't the part that's going to be doing the advanced recycling. So we're confused about that. And then we're concerned that if we say, oh, well, phase 1 is just the washing and the sorting, that seems okay, let's just let that. But once that happens, do we then have any opportunity to say no to phase 2, which is really the toxic part? I mentioned before the pilot plant is not operational, and these plastic plants are popping up all over the country. They're touting themselves as a solution to the plastics problem. None of them have actually done what they say they're going to do. Most of them create a lot of waste. There's a lot of waste involved in handling plastics because, especially these 3 to 7s, because they have additional toxins in them, the coloring, the plasticizing to make them the right shape, to make them the right hardness. There's the labels, of course, there's the trash part of what was in there before. A lot of that's going to go up with the washing, but they tend to generate a lot of waste. And so there's no plant that has actually succeeded in doing what this company says they're going to do. And most of them send a significant portion of like 60% of the plastic that comes in to landfills or to incinerators where they get burned, and that pollution just goes into the air and contributes to the climate crisis. So if you could go to the last slide, please. This is what we're talking about. This is me on the river, just down here with my inflatable kayak in Sunbury. This is our river. This is a threat to our river and our entire way of life here, as far as I'm concerned. We drink this water and we recreate on it, and I'd love to hear your questions. So thank you very much for staying. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Amy.
Yes, Dee.
Do we know anything at all about the actual chemical process? I understand that the catalyst is proprietary, but is there some place to go to read anything about how they're actually going from 3 to 7s to benzene, toluene, xylene, and propylene?
No, a lot of it is hidden by that proprietary catalyst term, that we are not allowed to find out more about what happens. But my understanding is that it's going to be a burning, a melting process that's going to, you're also a chemist, and that's going to cause plastic vapors that are going to be they're going to fractionate the vapor into different. I share your concern.
So,
yeah.
Are patents filed? I mean, is there at least that amount of technology out there? Reading a patent is hard work. but at least there might be some
Yeah,
information. in there.
not to my knowledge.
What's that?
It's a trade secret, probably.
Okay.
Oh,
Which is
Because I'm just, I've got the structures of these 3 to 7 plastics in my head, and I'm saying, what has to happen to these, the molecular
Well-
structure of those things to get to benzene, toluene, xylene, and propylene?
well, and there's other things in there that are not benzene, toluene, and xylene, right? And so where do those things go? And so when I asked that question at the open house, the CEO of the company said, we're gonna collect all that stuff and we're gonna sell it all. And I don't know what that means, and I don't know what those things are. And so the answer to almost all those questions was, we're gonna collect all those waste, we're gonna have 5% waste from the 450,000 tons, and everything else we're gonna sell. But I don't know how that works. I mean, I share your concern that,
Okay. It's the front part of the piece that I don't get. Once you get it all cracked down and distilling off the benzene and the toluene and those are good commercial products. They will have a market for those. That's, I just don't know how they get from the piece of plastic to there.
well, right, and all of the other things, the coloring, the plasticizers, the labels, all of those things, where do those things go? And then, I mean, one of the main concerns I have is honestly the microplastic. I just don't see how you can do all that and put it back in the river and not have microplastic in there. I mean, you understand micron filtration.
Sure.
I just don't see how it can be done at this scale. And they haven't done it at smaller
No,
scale.
and that's really that's a real troubling piece. They apparently can't do this at
Well,
all yet.
and there have been about 30 of these plants in the country, and 27 of them have already shut down, and the ones that are not shut down are just sending most of the plastic to incinerators to be burned or to be made into fuel, which is a thing. It's a toxic, climate polluting thing, but it's a way to get rid of plastic and make fuel. But we don't want to continue down that path, and that's not a solution to the plastics crisis.
Do you have a sense of a timeline for the 2 phases? And also, are there any other groups who are organizing or active who share your concerns? What state is that organization at?
Yeah, so,
Can you repeat the question?
so the first question was, do we know anything about the timeline? And the second one was, what other groups are involved? So the first question is, I think that the last thing I read was that phase 1 was supposed to be started in Q3 of this year, and up and running early next year. So that's just those, the buildings to do the washing and the sorting. They do have to go through some regulatory hurdles before that. So for example, they have to get a permit from the Susquehanna River Basin Commission to draw water, and they have to sort out stormwater permits with the Point Township. So that's for phase 1. Phase 2, we don't know anything about, because it wasn't a phase 1, phase 2 thing at the open house when we talked to them about it. Phase 1, phase 2 has emerged since as part of the plan. And then the second question about who else is involved. So we have a group of people who are meeting monthly, climate reality project people, including our petrochemical campaign organizers, who are not volunteers like me. Break Free from Plastics, Sierra Club, Gaia, the Middle Susquehanna Riverkeeper, and so those big groups, and then local people who are just concerned and have started to show up. And then we have a smaller group that's meeting to talk about, we want to plan a public meeting to sort of do this kind of thing where we can talk to people about their concerns and raise awareness, because a lot of the press so far has been directly from the company or from this DRIVE organization about $1.1 billion and 300 jobs coming here. And so we also have a group of Bucknell students who are going to help us with some of that kind of, canvassing, knocking on doors and things like that. you know, because, I mean, so Sandy Heim, who works with me in Climate Reality Project, she did a tabling event in Sunbury and tried to raise awareness of this plant in July, and people were completely unaware of it. So, you know, if people have concerns, this is the time to raise them before phase one starts. Anyone else have a question?
Sandy,
Claire.
thank you for the incredible amount of work that you and your team have done to show that the emperor has no clothes. It's pretty clear that the company based in Texas doesn't have anything at stake in our water quality or our air quality. Who are the local actors we can put pressure on to stop this from happening? I mean, whose desk do we go and chain ourselves to make this
Right,
stop?
so the question is, if I can paraphrase, whose desk do we chain ourselves to locally to stop this plant? Or who are the local people who have perhaps some authority over the permitting of this plant? And so there are a couple of things. I mentioned the Susquehanna River Basin Commission, who's going to have to permit the water. Point Township, they have a supervisor meeting once a month at 7 p.m. I think the next one is the 14th. Is that right? Is that a Tuesday? If you live in Point Township, they are actually very open and concerned about making sure that the Point Township residents' concerns are heard and addressed. And so that's a very good place to go and air your concerns. Whether they have the ability to stop this is not, I'm not sure, but they do have some regulatory authority over the wastewater permitting. Department of Environmental Protection, so not really local, but you know, they do have permitting authority over the air pollution part. And then just your representatives, you know, we have a new senator, local Pennsylvania senator in this region now, Linda Culver has just won an election, and I don't know for who lives actually in this area, but if that's your senator, then you know that's worth doing. And your local council people or whatever, you know, so that's what I would say. Oh, and the drive people, I wonder if they can be persuaded that this isn't a good idea. I have heard that there's an equivalency between the 300 jobs we're losing at Merck and the 300 jobs we're gaining here. But whether this is a good trade, I'm not convinced. Anyone else?
What
Yes.
about the flooding issue? How do they deal with the possibility of this commercial plant flooding?
So the question is, how do we deal with the possibility of the commercial plant flooding? Yeah, that's a huge concern. It will flood, and being in the 100-year floodplain to me means it's going to flood soon. I mean, we know that based on our knowledge of climate change, that 100-year floods are now becoming 10-year floods, and so it's going to happen. And when I asked the person at the company about that, she said that they're going to grade the site. They're not going to build on the 100-year floodplain part. They're going to have FEMA come back out and reevaluate whether it's still in the floodplain. That's my biggest concern, honestly, that having all this plastic and all these toxic chemicals on that site, plus this waste treatment plant on the site is going to be it's just an accident waiting to happen. Yes.
Hi, Sandy. I'm so glad you're here. You mentioned toward the end that the other plants that had attempted this ended up throwing away or burning 60% of the plastic material.
Yes.
Do you have any sense if Encina or any of the parties involved have been in communication with local landfills? Shipping in plastic from big cities and basically dumping it in our landfills seems like a very bad move, because we're basically gonna have to make more landfills.
Right, so the question is, what will the impact of the potential waste from this plant be on our local landfills? And that's an excellent question, because our local landfills are not prepared for plastic waste from New York City. And so I don't know the answer to your question, but it seems very likely that there will be increased plastic. And maybe they're talking to the landfills, and maybe the landfills are happy to take tons of plastic waste, but my guess is no, because I think they probably already are taking more plastic waste from our supposed, with the recycling that's going on now. When I put in my single stream bin, we've recently learned that only 5% of that is actually getting recycled, the plastic waste in there. So, that's already going to the landfill, and they're already having to deal with that. So, yeah, I don't know the answer, but that's one of the things that we would like to find out more about. So, yes.
Is anyone working on getting rid of plastics?
Is anyone working
Yeah,
on getting
some
rid of
places-
plastics?
Some places outlaw plastic bags.
Yes.
And,
Good thing.
So, yes, so that is, so the Break Free from Plastics folks who work very hard on this and have done a lot of research on these supposed solutions, and, I mean, everyone who plastics, there's like climate change and there's like plastic. I mean, it's just a huge, huge problem. And so the folks who think about this all the time, they say that we just have to reduce our use of plastics. We just simply have to reduce single-use plastic first, that's the low-hanging fruit, and then other plastics as we can. And we just have to stop. I mean, it's infiltrated every aspect of our lives, including our digestive systems. And we just need to solve that. And this, as much as I would have liked to have this be a solution, it just turns out that it isn't. And so it's not worth us investing a bunch of time and money in these solutions that aren't going to work. And I'll tell you that somebody on one of these calls told me they were at a shale gas futures meeting where Shell spoke. So Shell is the oil company. They're interested in, they were making plastic in Pittsburgh. They're interested in this plant because they think that this is going to be the vanguard of a lot of plants like this, that they're going to be able to point to and say, look, we can handle the single-use plastic problem this way, so we get to still make a bunch of single-use plastic. And so I'm just concerned that that's not the right direction for the planet. I mean, we know, if you've seen the pictures of the turtles with plastic around their neck, and I mean, it's everywhere, and it's a huge, huge problem. And this is not the solution, unfortunately. Yes, sir.
I was wondering, with the plastic problem, wouldn't it be more rational to not make plastic as cheap? I mean, it's so cheap. That's what the problem is. If people, like, if it's something like gold, people recycle that all the time. But plastic is so cheap, why couldn't they at least maybe put tax on it?
Right, so the question is, why can't we make plastic more expensive? And that's one way to de-incentivize the use of plastic, is, if it's cheaper to put your shampoo in a glass bottle, which maybe sounds dangerous in the shower, but it's the first thing that came to mind, or in those bars, that's a better. So yes, those kinds of things need to be part of a solution. I 100% agree with you. But unfortunately, it's everywhere, and it's cheap because we're making it in huge quantities from natural gas. Do you have a question, or are you waving to me that we're done?
No, I have a question. Does the EPA actually regulate microplastics as a contaminant of water in the rivers?
I don't know the answer to that question. So the question is, does the EPA regulate microplastic as part of a contaminant in the waters? I assume that they do as part of the Clean Air and Clean Water Act, but some of those regulations are now older, like from the 70s, and may not have considered microplastic at that time, and they may not have been updated. And there are plenty of oil and gas lobbyists who are lobbying to not have those regulations, to make it easier for these companies to do business. And so I think that, yes, that should be a thing, but whether or not it is, at this time, I don't know the answer. Yes?
So, for the folks here today, are there ways that we can get involved?
Oh.
Part one, and then part two is, is there a website or a place where we can go and get this information or similar?
Yes, so the question is how to get involved and where to get more information. And the first one is, so I had my email address on the last slide previously, and you can contact me and I can get you involved, and we would love to have you, because we really need local folks to raise their voices about this. And the second question was, where to find more information. So I would say the Break Free from Plastics website would be a good place. Also, if you contact me to get more involved, I have a ton of information I could share with you, and you're going to regret it that you ever asked. You know, there's just so much information on plastic, and it's overwhelmingly bad. But there are a lot of people who are concerned about this plastics crisis and who are working on it, and so, yeah, there's definitely tons of information out there about all these aspects. If you need more about the Encina plant, they actually have information on their website. It's like encinapointtownship.org. They have information about what the plant is supposed to do and things like that. That's a good place to start. Yes.
Yeah, just
Sarah.
was gonna say that I know Reverend DC has been doing a lot of reading too with some of the information you've given and that Marion's given to him, and he's very interested in this being a congregation-wide project because we are so close. So, we'll keep taking ideas, talk to him, talk to me, talk to, I don't know who else wants to say, yes, talk to me.
Lovely.
But, yeah,
And-
we'll be talking to you some more too, because
Yes,
he's been reading on this recently and just getting more horrified every time I talk about that.
Yeah, so we are so welcoming of local voices and concerns, just because, people here at this church, people at the Subaru dealership, there's a guy who lives right next to the site. You're going to be getting the brunt of all that traffic, all that noise and light and toxins is going to be right here. But, even me living in Lewisburg, 4 miles away, this is my river. This is where I, what I drink from. This is our recreation. I feel like it's a threat to this living thing that we have that defines our communities here, right? I mean, the river is the center of everything we do here. So, I don't know, I think it's something worth raising your voice about. So thank you, and I will be in touch. Anyone else? I thank you so much for staying late. I appreciate it.
Thank you for being here, Sandy.